There's no way it could be good, right? So it undercuts trust when it's too fast, right? So what you need is the right now. And the right now is what's the perfect amount of time to wait before you give the client your great idea. And there is a perfect amount of time. I don't know what it is, but I know how to find out, right? Which is ask customers what they'd expect and then do it 1 minute faster than that.
Aloha, and welcome to another episode of Groundswell Podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin. And in this episode, we bring the one and only Baer, the author of multiple books, including Talk Triggers and word of mouth marketing. I mean, he's like an expert in all these different areas, content marketing. We did an episode before on sound branding and marketing. And this one's interesting because he just did some research around time. And we talk about time and tequila is really the two topics, and what that's got to do with his personal brand and how important time and speed to market and speed for your customers is critical for business today. So without further ado, let's paddle in.
What is up? Fantastic to be here. Let's get into it.
Okay, I want to know what's going on with tequila.
Man, tequila is booming, baby. It is unbelievable. Tequila is growing 25 to 30% a year over year in the US, which is amazing. The US is now like 60% of all the tequila consumed in the world. So more tequila drunk in the US than in Mexico, which is kind of crazy. It's really wild. And so I have found myself as approximately the number 2 tequila influencer in the world. Non-celebrity category, right? I'm not up there with Kendall Jenner and The Rock and people who own tequila brands, but yeah, I'm doing 4 tequila videos a week on Instagram and TikTok, and have built a big following there, and it's a lot of fun. I get a lot of tequila sent to the house, and I was just in Mexico yesterday visiting tequila distilleries. So it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
So, why did you decide to do this?
Well, I'm from Arizona originally. I live in the Midwest now, but I'm from Arizona and I went to school in Tucson near the border. And so you're exposed to that kind of Latino culture consistently in that region of the US. And so I always was kind of interested in it. And about 25 years ago, Scott, a really good friend of mine, Tom Brecky, kind of got me into mezcal, which is really, really early. I mean, mezcal is even just now kind of breaking big in the US. And so we were super into it early. And there was a bar in Scottsdale we used to go when we were much younger and hang out. And there's a really knowledgeable bartender there who knew a lot about mezcal. And we just kind of prayed at his altar and we'd hang out and learn more about it. So that kind of kicked it off. And over the years, I learned more and more and spent more time studying and learning. And I've been to Mexico, I don't know, 25 times or something on different trips and vacations and such, and just got more and more into it. And then earlier this year, when I stopped recording my podcast, Social Pros, the show is still going great. I'm just not on the microphone anymore after 10 years. I'm like, I'm going to take the time that I used to spend making that podcast, and I'm going to try and teach people about tequila, because it really is a very complex subject, and there's a lot more nuance to it than people think. A lot of people just had Cuervo once in college, and that was the end of their tequila experience. And there's a lot to it. It really is a magical spirit. And my good friend Rory Vaden, who's a fantastic personal branding expert, has this saying, which is that your ideal audience is the person you used to be. And I thought, there was a time, it was a while ago, but there was a time where I didn't know anything about tequila. And now I know quite a bit. So let me try and make content for people who don't know anything yet and see if I can bring them on a journey. And that's what we're doing.
Is this like part of your personal brand? Like, is this a passion project, or is this leading to something bigger?
TBD, certainly a passion project, and I'm spending more time on it as time goes by. More opportunities are opening up, et cetera, to do some interesting things in the industry. It's certainly not a terribly lucrative endeavor just yet, but I do get a lot of free tequila, so there's that. But it's interesting that there are a lot of people who do speaking about marketing and customer experience, as I do, but none of them can do a tequila tasting, right, in a tequila education class. And so it's funny, now I'm getting more and more event planners say, hey, Jay, can you come keynote our conference? But then afterwards, can you do a tequila tasting for our sponsors, for our best customers, for our prospects, for our team? And I'm like, yes, I can. All right. So it becomes a bit of a differentiator in that regard, which is actually pretty cool. So I'm kind of trying to marry the two together, sort of my quote unquote day job as a marketing and CX advisor and strategist with my night job, which is tequila expert.
It makes total sense to me. And when you did it, I was like, I love tequila too. Like, so if you look at our liquor cabinet, I just have tequila and mezcal. Jill loves,
Yeah.
my wife loves mezcal. I like tequila.
Nice.
Always loved tasting. Don Julio Reposado is probably the one of my go-tos.
Yeah.
But I've listened to your Instagram. I'm like totally opening up a massive amount of tequilas you can't even get here in Canada. Super exciting. So I love the tequila world you're in. And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, this is cool. This is totally making a different sort of persona, personal brand, and
I
you're being
I
meta where you
always
can
have
use your
a stock camera.
marketing.
Here's one, here's another one. I'm literally
You should make your
surrounded
own
by.
brand. I'm sure you're thinking of that.
Oh yeah,
Like,
thinking about it. But I tell you what, you know what the best way to make $1 million as a tequila brand is?
hmm.
Start with $2 million. It it is a it is really hard. There
Is
are,
it?
and I'm not exaggerating, there are almost 2,000 separate tequila brands, and each one has between 2 and 6 SKUs, stock keeping units, individual products. So there are, and I'm not exaggerating, approximately 10,000 different bottles of tequila on the market right now.
Dude,
So to
that's a
say,
Netflix series right there.
yeah, so to say like, hey, I'm just gonna make one, and we're gonna be successful, you're probably not. And I'm actually advising a couple of brands right now, and I'm really honest with them. I'm like, man, it's tough. You got to have a hook, which is why celebrity backed tequilas tend to do really well, because you've got the power to break through all of that competitive obstacles.
Is the tequila, is this now part of, like, this is part of everything that you do? So if you look at what I'm, my persona of like I started heli skiing, marketing the
Yeah,
cat and heli skiing to get free powder.
yeah,
And but I integrated that into my brand, my personal brand, and what I did, and that's how I learned to do content, film production, and stuff. And it was joyful, and it was like still part of my brand. And now surfing has always been with me. It's like I've always loved surfing, and it just totally made it, part of what I do. And when I saw what you do with tequila, I'm like so curious about your rationale, and I love that it's because you love it.
yeah. It wasn't like, oh man, here's something I can monetize. Um, I probably can, and I probably will at some level. But look, man, I would have to be orders of magnitude better at monetizing tequila to make it compete with my day job as a professional speaker, right? It's just a different business, and so it isn't really about the financial part of it. It's just I love it and I want to teach people, period.
Love
and
it.
if and if I make a couple bucks along the way, great. I mean, legitimately, when I say this, the best thing, that like the big win, was not New York Times bestseller list, speaker hall of fame, or whatever. In the tequila business, the big win was, hey, I made enough money at this, which is very little, that now my tequila is a business expense, not a personal expense, so I can write it off on my taxes. To me, that was like the big win, right? That was like the big goal.
Totally
So literally, when I buy tequila now, I buy it with my American Express card, not my Visa card, and that in and of itself is a victory.
love it. Well, that was like me. It was like 12 years of free heli skiing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Hey,
how do you put a price on that and get
exactly.
film with your friends?
Exactly. It's all good.
Well, it
Yeah,
makes
and
it
like I
very
said, I was
different.
just in
Like,
Mexico yesterday, visiting with I brought a bunch of friends with me and visiting a bunch of distilleries and meeting producers and a lot of great people, and you can't replace those experiences.
there's a story here, though. The story, I think, is you've reached a level in your career, I think, and you're adding fun. It's like you're adding an element that you enjoy, so you keep the love of marketing. I'm just interpreting. And tell me if that's true or not. Is that not part of
Oh,
what
for
this is?
sure. Yeah, I've always loved it, but I couldn't and wouldn't spend the time to create tequila content because when I had, a bunch of team members working with and for me and a bunch of clients that I was trying to help succeed, for me to spend that kind of time on a passion project would have, at least in my estimation, I would have interpreted it as frivolous and really almost unconscionable. Like I just wouldn't have done it.
Mhm.
And now that I have more time, I don't feel guilty about devoting the time in that way, if that makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense.
Now, I think a healthier attitude towards life would have been, well, Jay, why can't you pursue your passions while you also pursue your profession? But one of the reasons I'm successful at business is that I don't think like that, right? I'm like, hey, I'm going all in on this, and I will spend less time with friends and less time with family and less time on hobbies, because I'm going to do whatever it takes to be successful for my business and my clients' businesses. And so, historically, work-life balance has not really been one of my strong suits, so it's nice to catch up a little bit.
It's consciously out of balance. It's what people do. Like as you know, I work with Tony Robbins and a platinum partner, and he calls it consciously out of balance. It's like you're intentionally out of balance for a period of time to create immersion or focus. And what people don't understand is that whole life. It's not life balance. It's about life work integration. That's kind of what you just did with this skill. You just integrated it.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. And the tricky part now is not for me to integrate it, because I think I got it figured out, but it's to make it work from a personal brand standpoint. Like literally, I'm in the process of redoing my website and my speaker trailer video for next year. And so I keep thinking about, all right, how much should I lean into the tequila thing, right? And or how much should I keep it separate? Because maybe meeting planners will think it's weird that I'm doing this. Some love it, and I don't want others to be turned off. But by the same token, it's like, hey, if you got a differentiator, you might as well use it. So it's interesting. I'm really processing all that information in real time right now and thinking about how much do I really want to put that out front. We'll see.
Isn't it kind of a talk trigger as well?
For sure. It really
So
is.
it's very meta. Like if you think about having a theme and through line of a personal brand, you've kind of creating that. It's like a differentiation.
Yeah, it is. And it's super memorable. It's also, I got to tell you, so I don't know, I've got 300,000 or something tequila followers on my channels now, which is dramatically more than I have on my channels devoted to marketing and customer experience. And it's it's a little disheartening, Scott, that I've spent 30 years writing books and giving speeches and being an advisor in marketing and customer experience. And I have way more of an audience almost instantaneously for tequila. I get recognized all the time now, like on planes and in restaurants and in the airport, not because, oh, you're the guy who wrote all the amazing marketing books. It's like, oh, you're the tequila guy. And I'm like, damn, did I just waste 29 years of my life? I could have been a tequila guy all along.
It's funny because I did the opposite. Mine was I was more known for cat skiing and heli skiing. I mean, I even have a surfing group that's like 12,000 people.
Yeah.
I don't have that many for Groundswell.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I was in the Delta Lounge last night in Atlanta, and the bartender's like, "You're the tequila guy." I'm like, "Yes, I am. Here's a pin. I've got Baer tequila pins that I give to people. It's been fun."
My signature drink was called Tequila Mockingbird. And it's passion guava and tequila.
Passion guava tequila. That sounds delicious. I like that.
Yeah. The play on, that's the marketer, be the play on words.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, so the tequila integration, personal brand, this is, I was curious, and so you've sort of scratched that itch, and I think that if anybody's going to be able to make this into, something that makes total sense and integrating meta with how you market and stuff, I think you will, no problem. I don't think there's any concern that. My next thought is talking a little bit about your research that you published. On can you share with us a little bit about that? And let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's called The Time to Win. You can find it at theTimeToWin.com. And my observation was, coming out of the pandemic, all of our lives have been changed irrevocably. And one of the big changes is that our understanding of and relationship with time has changed. All of us were forced to confront a reality, which is that each and every one of us only has 1,440 minutes a day, period. And there's nothing you can do to change that. And it doesn't matter if you're Elon Musk or somebody experiencing homelessness, or you live in Canada or Cambodia, or you're a grandfather or a grandson. We all have the exact same amount of time. And in fact, time is the only thing that everybody on the planet shares equally. The only thing, literally. And all of these trends that we talk about in business right now, things like work from home, things like bleisure travel, which is the hybridization of business and leisure travel, quiet quitting, the great resignation, all of this stuff is actually only one trend, which is that we care more about time than we used to. We care more about time and how we spend it. And I decided to put some data around that. So I did this big national project, talked to 2,000 or so American consumers across every demographic group, and found that indeed speed is more important than ever. When a business takes longer than you expected to get back to you, what it feels like today is that time is being stolen from you. And when a business is faster than you anticipated getting back to you, it feels like you've been given a gift of time. So Scott, you are very familiar with the idea, as I'm sure everybody is tuning in, that good, fast, cheap, pick any two, right? We've been talking about that for a long time. Good, fast, cheap, pick any two. I will tell you that this research suggests that fast has to be one of them, that fast is non-negotiable. Today, you must be fast. And then you can decide in your business whether you want to be fast and good or fast and cheap, but you damn well better be fast, because 2/3 of consumers say that speed is as important as price. I believe that speed is now the most important element of customer experience, and the research largely bears that out.
Interesting. And that is in terms of creating a frictionless experience. You're talking about, because if I think of the Joe Pine, he has a quote it's about time well spent, which is experiences. So when you go to a Disneyland park, you do not want to spend time in the line getting in. But then you want to spend as much time once you're inside the experience. So the relation to time is like, there's a little bit of like, the idea of creating experiences, like you lose track of time, and it's a good thing, but that's because you choose to. You're talking about like this getting in and getting out.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, people are not typically choosing to wait on hold or spend time organizing a delivery or waiting for a sweater to arrive via UPS or whatever the circumstances are. And it's funny you mentioned Disney, because it's one of the lessons that I've been teaching about this research is a shocking percentage of customers, like more than half, say that they would spend significantly more money, like a crazy amount of more money, if they never had to wait for a particular business. So my advice is that every business, yours, mine, all of them, should have some kind of a fast pass, right? So at Disney, I think they call it Lightning Lane now, but it used to be Fast Pass. This idea that you pay a little bit more and you get access to the rides faster, sooner. Every business should do this. I'm actually thinking about doing it for tequila, because I get all these brands saying, "Hey, can you review our tequilas?" I'm like, well, yeah, but I have so many lined up. It's going to be like February before I can review it. Or you can pay me and I'll review it next week. Same idea, right? It's the fast pass. So if you're a dentist, well, our next appointment's in 2 months, or we're going to charge you an extra $200 and you can come in Wednesday. It's amazing how well that works in every industry. And it's also staggering how rare businesses actually have that opportunity.
So how do you identify? So if you're somebody that's listening and going, I get it. Okay, we need to be faster. What's the process of identifying where the barnacles in the bottom of the ship are
Yeah.
that are slowing you down?
Yeah. Well, and let me add some nuance to this. It's not necessarily just about being faster, because, and you're going to appreciate this, there is a point at which you are too fast. So you ever go to a Mexican food restaurant and you order enchiladas and tequila, but enchiladas in particular, and then like 90 seconds later, they come back with your enchiladas and you're like, bro.
It's like fast food. Yeah, you're like you
how
don't
did that
appreciate
happen?
it.
Is there like an enchilada machine? Did somebody else order this and they didn't like it and they're waiting for somebody else to order it and then they brought it to your table?
And by the way, enchiladas are my favorite Mexican dish, so that's why this is very funny.
Yeah,
It's true. I've actually had this. I'm like,
thing,
holy crap, that was like so fast.
yeah, it's sus. It's like super suspicious. You're like, Okay, this doesn't make sense. There
Is that a
are
word? Sus? Is
It
that
is,
like
yeah,
a
that's what all the kids say. They
okay.
say sus. I got 2 college students. They all say sus. Uh, and like you don't want to be the fastest tattoo artist in town, right? You don't want to be, the speedy lawyer. Like there are some scenarios where we're the fastest roofers. Like there's some things where it doesn't actually work. And so and we studied this a lot in the report. So it turns out there's a point at which speed actually undercuts consumer confidence. And so what you want is not necessarily to just be faster all the time. What you want in every business is something that I call the right now. And the right now is the perfect amount of elapsed time in every customer interaction. And the right now is slightly faster than customers think is possible. Slightly faster than they think is possible. And so what you want to do is go through your whole customer journey, right? Awareness, interest, action, delivery, help, all the different kind of customer scenarios. And then figure out, okay, what do customers expect? How long do they expect this to take? And how can we do it 1 minute faster than that? So where you start, to address your question specifically, is to figure out, well, how long does it take now for us to do these things? Which sounds like a really obvious question, but it is staggering how few businesses can actually answer that. Because I ask people all the time, cool, all right, how long does it take you to set an appointment with your customer or a kickoff call or whatever the circumstances are? And what I hear every time, Scott, is this: well, usually it takes blank. And I'm like, that's not what I asked you. I said, how long does it take on average? And nobody knows. Why? Because they don't pay attention to it, they don't track it, and they don't log it anywhere. Usually is just a story that you tell yourself. That's not math, that's an anecdote. So the best thing you can do to start is to document how long does it take your business to execute on all the different customer journey interactions. Start there and then figure out how to make those faster. Does that make sense?
hmm how do you actually, I mean, you can ask clients, but how do you get like a real understanding of what the clients are expecting?
Yeah, you literally ask them, right? So you take the same research I did, and we publish most of the questions, and do that same questionnaire, that same survey to your customers and say, okay, um, if we were going to set up an appointment to deliver your couch, let's say you're a furniture store, how long would you expect it to take to get that couch delivered? Is it an hour? Is it 4 hours? Is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it 5 days? Is it a week? And literally do that research, right? And then say, okay, cool. Now let's make it slightly faster than that.
Interesting, because this is also can be embedded into your value proposition design. So if you think of, Pizza Hut's, pizza delivered under 30 minutes or your money back,
Yep,
you
exactly.
know?
Absolutely. Or somebody like Lemonade, right? Which is the AI powered home and auto insurance company, right? They will process claims, and they say this right on their website, within 3 seconds. So you write in and you say, here's what happened. I got in a car wreck and a squirrel jumped out in front of me or whatever. Based on what you tell them and some other kind of big data things that they're working on, they will decide in 3 seconds whether you get your money or you need to talk to a human being to talk about it more. 3 seconds, right? But that is their value design. Like it's lightning fast processing. I think that's what they call it. So not only do they have the fast pass, like we talked about, but their whole business model is built around being incredibly fast.
When you look at value proposition design, motivation equals perceived value minus perceived cost. The perceived cost, time is usually attached to that. It's not money. It's like the time to learn something new.
Yep.
It's like maybe it's not just the time it takes for you to deliver something. Maybe there's I'm just wondering from your point of view, because you've been on this topic, what are the different unexpected areas that you wouldn't think a business should be paying attention to that are these friction points or time sucking activities that bring your brand down?
Yeah, some of it is just making sure that you understand that customers expect you to be on top of it in all the places. So I'll give you an example. Contact us forms on a website. What most businesses think is, well, geez, if a customer is going to use a contact us form, whatever their scenario is must not be that urgent because there's other contact mechanisms that perhaps they would use if it was really important. They might call, they might text, they might email, they might hit us up on social. There's a lot of things they might do if it was more important. But what the data and the reports show is that even somebody using a contact us form expects a response from a business within 24 hours. And a lot of businesses do not reply that quickly to contact us forms because they assume that the customer has picked it because it's not important. But maybe they've picked it just because they prefer that contact mechanism, right? So there's just a lot of like assumptions that businesses make about time and customer contact selection that are probably mistakes when you sort of make those broad generalizations.
What if you declare time, meaning, hey, we'll get back to you in 2 days if you use this form for faster contact. So now you're actually telling them where to go, or does that
Totally
not work?
important. Like one of the key lessons in this whole research is yes, you want to be objectively faster, but not too fast, as we talked about. But perhaps as important, if not more important, is to set expectations for speed. Because as we talked about, it's all about being faster than they expect. Well, if you can moderate those expectations somehow, then maybe even if it does take a little bit longer, the customer's okay with that, right? So if you know, let's say, you're going to buy something on Etsy. And in fact, this just happened to me 2 weeks ago. I got my stepmom a blanket for her birthday, like a lap blanket. And I could have gotten a lap blanket on Amazon in like 10 minutes. But instead, I got one on Etsy from a lady who hand knits these blankets. Okay. Are they any better than the Amazon one? I don't know. Probably not. I have no idea, literally no idea. But I'm like, well, that's cool that this lady makes them. Now, it was going to take her a week to make the blanket because she's got to make the blanket. And I was like, well, that's cool. She's got to get yarn and stuff. Like, yeah, that's a whole thing. If Amazon was going to take a week to send me a blanket, it'd be like, what the heck are you talking about a week from an Amazon delivery for blanket, right? So because there was a brand story there around her process and her differentiator, the net amount of time became less important. It's time versus expectations, not net time, right? So one of the things you can do is if it does take you longer or it's going to take you longer, explain why. Just instead of trying to lie to the customer or obfuscate the fact that it's going to take longer, just tell them why. And if it's a decent reason, then they'll be like, "Cool, I get it. That's fine."
What if you flip it? What if you're to actually use time as a strategic differentiation, going, this is going to take twice as long? Because I think about
Mhm.
this experience I had. Let me tell you a little quick story. I was this is my early ages when I had my former agency, and I was so quick to I was so excited about this great idea, and I thought it was a really good fucking idea. It was for an airline. The problem was, I in a meeting just stated the idea, and they couldn't buy into it. I tried. It was a brilliant idea, but because I brought it up in such a short amount of time, it certainly couldn't have value. The idea that we toiled over that was like nowhere near as good as the one they went for. It's
Mhm.
because they valued it differently.
Yep.
And
They're like,
I
"Well,
realized
if
in that
it."
moment
Yeah.
not to pipe up on ideas that
That's
they
what I was
want
saying, this idea of
strategies
being
about.
too fast, right? It's like that's the enchilada story,
Yeah,
right? That's the enchilada story in a B2B context, which is, well, there's no way it could be good if you came up with it that quickly.
totally.
There's no way it could be good, right? So it undercuts trust when it's too fast, right? So what you need is the right now. And the right now is what's the perfect amount of time to wait before you give the client your great idea. And there is a perfect amount of time. I don't know what it is, but I know how to find out, right? Which is ask customers what they'd expect and then do it 1 minute faster than that.
So you've ever heard how do you feel a nightclub? Is you just basically create a long line.
Yeah. Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's like so it creates an opposite effect. When you think of time and the idea of like slow, maybe there's some ways that slow can be strategically leveraged a little bit in terms of creating the perceived value
Yeah.
of
Well,
time.
the perceived value is if it's this long of a line, it must be amazing, right?
Right.
Therefore, you're setting the expectation that the time to wait is worth it. But most of the time that we wait for business is not worth it. It's wasted time. It's stolen time because, we're waiting for the cable guy to show up, right? I'm not, and I'm not enjoying that time. I'm not waiting with bated breath that I can't wait for them to get there because I'm going to get in and there's going to be bottle service, right? And partially you don't know when that person's going to show up either, right? That's the thing that is the worst. We're going to be there between 8 and 1. I'm like, well, okay. I mean, all right. So I guess we got a 5-hour window. What am I supposed to do during that time? Right. So you're right that you can use slow as a psychological advantage as long as people have a sense that what's on the other side is going to be worth the waiting time.
Right. The brand
So,
promise, the juice got to be worth the squeeze.
Yeah. So what we have now is a lot of businesses. It's a little better now because supply chain's gotten a little fixed in the last few months. But up until fairly recently, we had a lot of businesses on their websites or even on their in the real world signage saying, "Hey, we got supply chain issues, we got labor shortages. It's going to take a whole bunch of time to get your furniture, your sweater, your hamburger, your cocktail, whatever." And that seems like it makes sense because you're setting expectations. But the problem is, in almost no case did businesses provide any actual detail as to what the delay was based on or why, other than labor, right? Which is not enough meat on the bone to make it a good explanation. So we actually studied that in the research and found that 83% of customers now say that businesses should be as fast or faster than they were before the pandemic. So this idea that you're going to get like a pandemic pass, like it's okay because we all understand times are tough. Nope. Customers don't care anymore. They're like, hey man, it's been 2.5 years. Get your shit together or explain it to me better.
What about triage? So if you think of, maybe you can't deliver, maybe there's a reality you have. Is there an expectation, at least if somebody took like you were quick to just like answer the phone, we're on it, we're going to follow up to you, but we aren't able to solve it fast, but
Absolutely.
we're able to at least talk to you fast. Is that going to
massively important? Massively important. I talk about this a lot in different presentations. This idea of answering even if you don't have the answer.
Right.
So what happens most of the time is you either get busy or like let's say a customer asks a question and you don't know the answer. You got to go find out, or you got to go ask a colleague, or you got to look it up, or you got to talk to a supplier or whatever. A lot of scenarios where that's the case. What happens almost every time is that you get this inbound inquiry from a customer or a prospective customer. You've got to go get more information to answer them. And so then you go do that. You go find out. And then once you've got the answer, you reply. The whole time that you're doing that, whether that's an hour or a week, the customer is thinking, I wonder if they got my question. I wonder if they're blowing me off. I wonder if they value me as a customer. Speed is interpreted as caring in today's society. Speed is interpreted as caring. So the better way to do it is to say, wow, that's a good question. So good, in fact, I don't know the answer. I have to talk to the supplier to find out. I'm going to go do that. And when I get the answer, I will call you back. Now, does that require 2 interactions with the customer? Yes. But it will be way better psychologically. And the first one is really quick, right? It's like, yeah, I got it. I'll get back to you. So it's definitely the best practice to answer even if you don't have the answer.
What about the idea of maybe time transparency? So if you think of Uber, they were really transparent about in the app going where they are. So it's like that's a form of seeing time, going, I'm willing to wait because when I had a cab before, I had no idea when they're showing up, but at least I was fine because it is what it is. I could see them in traffic or something.
Yeah, it's so good. Although I would tell you, that thing doesn't work like it used to. It feels like a shell game now, man. They're like 7 minutes and it always takes 12.
And then it goes back and it's like, they're like,
yeah, the guy's like doing circles. I'm like, is this guy doing donuts or is this app broken? Like it's the whole thing. Like it seemed to used to work. I mean, I don't know, but it used to seem to work a lot better to me. And now the whole thing seems like BS a little bit.
It's true. It's like 6 minutes and then it goes up to 8 minutes. So it doesn't.
Then they do the thing where they switch your driver. Like, yeah, this guy, you don't want to do it. So now we're going to get Susan. And then the clock restarts. And you're like, whoa, what happened to the other guy? Yeah,
But still they're transparent about it. So it's, to me,
it
it's
is.
like, so it's on the topic of transparency of time.
It's
So in
better
a
than a cab
B2B
because
environment,
a taxi is like guys come in sometime, someday, right?
yeah.
So it is better, right? The time transparency is better than a taxi because you call a taxi and they're like, "Yep, we're coming to get you," and that's all the information you have, right? That allegedly someone is coming at some point in the near or distant past or future. That's all the information you have. So that creates a lot of anxiety. At least there's some anxiety reduction with the way Uber and Lyft do it.
Well, I'll give you a different example that was interesting for me from a customer experience standpoint. I ordered a new Porsche 911 for us Target in
Mhm.
February, and they said it was going to take me almost 2 years to get the
Yeah.
Porsche. Through whatever reason, which they didn't give me a reason, but I was happy to hear about that it actually was going to come out in September. But the cool thing about it is in my portal, they would send me like basically like a little map, like it's my engine's now being tested. Listen here if you want to listen to it. And I'm like, oh,
Oh, that's
that's my
awesome.
engine. And then it showed me like, oh, your target top just got put on, and it showed a picture in the manufacturer, like my actual car. It was like a
Right.
grainy shot, but I didn't care. It was like it just showed it being the robot, like putting the little target thing on it, and then it showed me, oh, it's now in shipping. And it's like, so it gave me this idea of
That's
like
really
whatever
good.
my wait period was an adventure. It turned the wait into an adventure and experience.
Yep, I love that. And it's actually better that the video and stuff was grainy because then you believe it, right?
Totally.
If it was super high quality, you're like, dude, this is a stock photo, right? And so the
Hmm.
fact that it was like a little less professional gives it a lot more believability. Yeah, it's awesome. I want to, if you grab some screenshots, I'd love to have those, use it for a presentation. It's right up my
Totally.
alley.
And they were really specific because I had I knew it was mine because I customized it. The tagging, it was specifically like just like on
Yeah,
the one I designed.
it's so
Yeah.
great. It's a that yeah, and that's it. If you know it's going to be, and you're exactly right. I mean, think about music on hold. Why do people have hold music?
To entertain, to hold you over as long as possible, to make you
Right,
less impatient.
right. To make the wait, quote unquote, better. Now, ironically, most hold music is terrible, right? And so it actually arguably makes it worse, not better. But you can you know you can change that, right? Like you can make that experience less painful if you choose to do so.
Yeah, like I think there's one hold music once that it's a song like "You're on hold, we're sorry you're on hold," and there's like a whole,
Yeah, yeah, we
it was
talked.
just
It
kind of
was
funny the first time,
yeah, it was
but
from Uber conference. We talked about it in. It's actually a case study in my book, Talk Triggers, because that was their talk trigger, their word of mouth generator was the on hold music, and it was actually written and performed by their CEO, which makes it even better. So yeah, you can make the wait better, but most people don't. Most businesses are like, yeah, you'll wait. Like think about how often you go to a restaurant and they're like, yeah, you can wait, wait in the bar. Well, there's no room in the bar. You can't get a drink in the bar, right? It's crowded in the bar. It's loud in the, just like the whole thing is not a great experience. But if it was, hey, go sit over there, I'll get you a drink and bring it to you, right? And the first one's on us, or we'll just add it to your tab later, right? You could make that a much better experience without a lot of additional kind of operational design.
so that right there, I mean, just that alone, like looking at the enough, like you can't avoid weights in some cases for your
Yep.
business. How could you turn it into a strategic advantage? How could this be part of your brand? Like you and I were having a little discussion before in the last episode you and I did on sound branding and audio,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
the world of that. Like I think that has massive possibilities.
Huge. Huge. I mean, there's, you just have to think about what some of it is just secret shop in your own business. Right? So rarely do business people secret shop their own business. They think they know what the customers are going through because they own the business, but you don't. You're not the customer. You have the curse of experience, the curse of knowledge. That's why shows like Undercover Boss are so effective because it's like, oh, wait, when I actually experience it from this side of the table, I see things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And so you've just got to take every place where the customer has to wait and say, all right, what's the shittiest part about this? And just do something about it. Right? Like just do something about like you said with the Porsche, right? Like, okay, well, the worst part is I gotta wait 2 years. Well, how do I make that better? Well, I make it a series of anticipatory moments. right? And instead of just it being a black hole where you have no information, you're also getting fed bits of information along the way, so your confidence in the process um, continues to build, right? It doesn't fall off, because when consumers have an information vacuum, that's when they start to freak out, because they say they don't care about me and it's not going well, right? As long as you know what's going on, you'll typically wait longer. And that's the problem with on hold music, right? It doesn't give you any information. It's actually better when they do the, hey, it's going to be 12 minutes to get your call, but then they're like, hey, it's only going to be 7 minutes. So they have the periodic updates, almost like Uber, but on the phone. That's actually a better way to do it.
Mhm. It's like I guess there's a logic, which is intellectually, I think people are hearing you and going, look, speed up, do everything you can. But there's like going from IQ to EQ, which is more empathy. Like,
Yep.
how can you actually have a little bit more, like shifting a little bit and sitting in the seat of the person, and what are they experiencing and feeling, and how can you adaptivate that in some way?
Yeah, it's so true. It's like you think about the math around speed, and it really is sort of um soulless, right? But it doesn't have to be. It's really both sides are required, right? Which is, yeah, be faster, because people hate to wait, and they hate to wait more than they used to. But also, why do they hate to wait? Well, they hate to wait because when they're waiting without reward or without any sense of why this makes sense, then they feel like you are wasting their time. And when you're wasting their time, what it really means is they're not getting able to enjoy their own lives, right? You are making their life worse. You are not allowing them to spend time with their family and their loved ones and on their own passions, right? And that gets into sort of a deep emotional, empathetic kind of place, right? That most people don't associate with time and responsiveness, which is why I'm excited about this topic and excited to do a lot of speaking about it, because I think there's a lot more layers to this onion than are typically understood. And like, I didn't want to do a speech and maybe eventually a book that's just like be faster, because that's kind of axiomatic and not terribly interesting. But when you start thinking, okay, there is a perfect amount of elapsed time, and it's because it matters to people's psychology and their soul, right? You're like, oh yeah, there's really more to this.
I think you're right when you say, it's like when a demonstration of respecting someone's time is one of the highest honors you can give somebody.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. That's true. I think we're a little better about that in B2B. People are a little more cautious about wasting clients' time and colleagues' time and things like that. But in the B2C world, especially in lower dollar categories, man, we waste customers' time all the time, right? We that respect evaporates often. You're waiting too long in line at the grocery store, at the bank, or somewhere else. And you're like, hey man, what about my time, right? And it's easy to overlook for sure. And also because it's hard to track. Like, if you've got a bunch of customers in line and they just bail, right? They're just like, you know what? F it, I'm out. There's literally no data point on that. Like, there's no way for the business to calculate that. You can't calculate that financial loss because there's no data point, right? Unless you're counting foot traffic and then, correlating that with total transactions or something, which is a level of nuance that is very, very rare indeed. If somebody just bails, you never, you go to a furniture store, you can't get help. You go to Best Buy, you can't get help, right? There's no way to track that revenue loss because it doesn't show up on a ledger. And that's really dangerous for business.
The unmeasured economic waste is crazy.
Crazy.
And if you think of the rub being, how many times have you been asked? So Don Peppers and Joe Pepper, Don Peppers and Joe Pine, they
Yep.
wrote this book around learning relationships in Harvard
Mhm.
Business Review.
Yep.
And the idea of the more you learn about me, the more that you teach me, the more I'm going to personally provide value to you. But
Yep.
the rub is, when we ask people to fill out this information, or you are my customer, how maddening is it when you go and you go, I've already given you this information. Why am I telling you again?
Oh,
Drives me crazy with my bank. It's wasting my time, and I've already invested the time. So that's another question for you, is like, what about the waste of invested time that businesses are totally affecting their business with this economic waste?
So that's actually the number 2 customer frustration, this idea that you have to repeat information you've already given the business, because it calls into question what else the business is screwing up. Like if I already told you this information, or you should already have this in my previous order or orders in the past, and now you've got to repeat it, you're like, well, wait a second. Like what else is disconnected inside this business? It really undercuts trust in the organization. The number 1 customer frustration is channel shifting. So this is when you, like, let's say you reach out to a business via social media, and there's like, hey, thanks for talking to us on Facebook. First thing you should do is call this 888 number. And you're like, whoa, dude, like I already called and they couldn't help me, or it was going to take an hour on hold. So that's why I went to social media. It's super frustrating. And it's this idea that somehow the business's preference for contact mechanism is more important than the customer's preference for contact mechanism. Like customers don't pick a channel like on a roulette wheel. They don't like spin the wheel like, whoa, email, chatbot, right? Like it's not like that. They pick whatever mechanism A, they prefer, and B, they think will get them the best and fastest response. And so businesses have to respect that. Like, they didn't pick it on accident, they picked it on purpose. So the worst thing you can do is be like, hey, thanks for choosing phone. You got to email us. Or the other, you see this every day, right? You get an email from a business, do not reply. You can't reply to this email. I'm like, it's 2023. I can't reply to the email. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is insane. So yeah, you got to respect their channel choices too.
That's interesting. So the channel choices. So one is they are trying to reach you on a channel, then and it might be because they perceive they're getting responded. I've always found it interesting. I've never hardly ever seen this, but when someone goes, "What's your preferred channel of
Mhm.
conversation?" I
Yep.
feel like that's a really smart fucking way
I
of
teach
going
that
about
all
it.
the
Sorry for
time,
dropping
right?
the F bomb, but really,
Add
I
it to
think
your
it's fucking
database,
awesome.
especially in B2B where you don't have as much volume and you're probably going to talk to that individual customer more often. Man, write it into your Salesforce, right? Like, okay, this customer prefers text, this customer prefers phone, this customer hates phone, loves email. Like, and then use that as your contact mechanism going forward. Like, I think it's such an easy way to add just respect into the interactions.
Yeah, in my book, I call it intimacy at scale.
Yeah.
Businesses are trying so hard to automate things, but the whole point of automation should be create more human interaction and
Yeah.
humanize it.
Right. Yeah. To free up resources, maybe to be more human. Look, automation is the enemy of empathy. It just is. Right. And so you got to find a way to be more efficient without being inhuman.
I am that quote is going to live in infamy if you haven't already said it before.
I
That's
haven't written
actually beautiful.
it. I just came up with that, but thank you.
Well, I'm going to put your name to it. That's actually, I wish that I had that in my book because that's exactly how I feel. It is the enemy
Yeah.
of empathy. It really is. And if you think of it in those terms of business, when you're trying to use automation to speed things up, sometimes I'm wondering if it makes sense to actually insert humans, even if it's slower, it maybe will feel better. Is that possible?
For sure, especially depending on what the likely need is from the customer standpoint, right? If it's more complex or potentially more often than not kind of bad news, then having that human component can be really, really effective in comparison to a tech enabled or tech driven scenario. Because look, let's just be honest about it. The reason most businesses adopt technology in a customer service or customer experience context is not to improve customer outcomes. It's to improve business profits, right? It's not as if people say, you know what was really going to make customers the happiest is chatbots. No, it'll save you money because you have to have less people on the phone. Now, there are ways to make chatbots good, and in some cases, it's better for customers because they get faster service, etc. But largely, companies aren't coming to a tech solution because it adds empathy or humanity or kindness or respect. They just aren't. Now, that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. It doesn't mean there's no place for it. Of course, there is. But you've got to make sure you're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
It feels like this time thing is its own strategy, right? Like it's like a nuance thing, right? Like on the example you gave of insurance, if you were, say, for example, like we'll give you a approve your loan in 3 seconds from an automated bot, but if we turn it down, you don't get the response. You get a personal human calling you, going, "Sorry,
And that's
you
what
were
they do it.
turned down." That would be maybe the way to blend the two. Is that
That's
right?
exactly how they do it. Yeah, because and it's not even we're sorry. It's more like we need more information. Like
Okay.
we can't process it. We can't call it in 3 seconds because like we don't have in the database like an iguana policy. So this is a weird one. So we got to talk about it, you know? That's how they do it.
The iguana policy.
It
It's a
costs a
good
little bit extra,
example.
but it's always worth it. Always
Yeah,
worth
I'm
it.
gonna call this the iguana method because you just gave me a really big insight. Like, I think there's a nuance to this, and I think that's what your research is showing is that people want it, but not necessarily. Would you call it right now?
Yeah, the right now.
The right now. Yeah,
Yeah, which is the perfect amount of elapsed time in every customer interaction.
and I think that's just a great way of describing it. It's just what is the right now is the journey.
Yeah, and what keeps me really interested in this topic is that the right now is different in every industry, and it's different in every business because, like you said, it's about what market position do you want to occupy? Do you want to be the handmade blanket provider, or do you want to be the factory made blanket provider? The associated speed with each of those market positions is different. And so that's why when I say you've got to be fast and good or fast and cheap, I'm not kidding, right? Like that's it. But fast is relative. Fast is relative based on expectations, right? So you can't, even if you're artisanal, you can't be annoyingly slow, right? You can't be slower than they expect. If you say it's going to take us a week to make a blanket, you're like, cool, I want a handmade blanket in a week, but then it takes them 3 weeks to make the blanket, you're still pissed,
Hmm.
right? So it's all about kind of how you set those expectations and why the customer's like, yeah, I'm okay with that. So that's why the right now really has to be something that each business figures out for themselves. Like I've had people say, well, what is the right now? I'm like, I don't know. And you need to figure that out.
Little bit of a twist here. So we've been talking this whole time about time. Like we're creating a time environment, helping our clients. What about when the company switches it when they're putting pressure of time on you? So an example is I go through a click funnel and it says you got 1 minute to make a decision, but there's only two
Countdown.
tickets left, and if you don't make a decision, you're effed. Like, or they get
Yeah.
there's a timer kicking me out of my Ticketmaster thing. Like that's
Yes.
time pressure.
Yes, absolutely. And you see how effective that is psychologically, right? And so that should give you a little clue about how much we value time, right? That we respond to it on the other end, but then as business people, we forget how well that works. We're like, yeah, they'll wait. Yeah, it's fine. It's okay if the line's longer, and we forget like how well it works on the other end. And next time you get one of those tickers and your heart starts racing, remember why that is, and understand that 1,440 minutes we each have each day is a pretty powerful motivator.
And but people don't appreciate being pressured for time.
Yeah, again, it's just like they're willing to wait if you make it worth the wait.
Hmm.
They're okay being pressured if they believe that what's on the other end of that is something that is truly scarce and actually is a limited time offer,
There it
right?
is, truly
We're
scarce.
Yeah, where
I,
people get mad is if they were like, okay, they're doing this webinar every week, right? So the fact that they're saying I only have 3 minutes to sign up is BS because I got every week I can sign up for this. But when it's Taylor Swift tickets and you got 10 seconds to do this or you're out for good, yeah, they'll perform.
yeah, it's about being authentic, transparent. Transparency of time, I think, is what's it all coming down to. Like, look at the blockchain; it's about instantaneous, right?
Yeah,
Totally
exactly.
tracked source time.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I'm enjoying having conversations about it on great shows like these and on stages and such. And it's been fun. It reminds me each time I kind of do a new content series, like I did with word of mouth, and before that with customer service, and before that with content marketing. It's fun to have conversations, even with event attendees, like off stage. People have examples like, "Well, there's this business in my town. that is really fast or is really slow or does this thing. It's just awesome to find new stories and new examples, like your Porsche example. That's a great one that I'll probably reuse.
Love to. And last question for you is, what's the most insightful, unique insight that you never thought of that just kind of came up in this journey of you doing the research or sharing examples that you're like, yeah, I never would have thought of this.
Well, I'll give you two. One is that baby boomers are the least patient generation, and Gen Z, the youngest consumers, are the most patient generation.
What?
Didn't see that coming. Would have thought it was the exact opposite. That was a surprise and is definitely interesting. Somebody said the other day, maybe it's because baby boomers have less time left, and I'm like, well, that's a little maudlin and sad, but maybe that is the explanation. I don't know.
Well, the older you get, the more you really appreciate time,
I
right?
think that's it. Yeah, I think it's because you've got. I think it's because you have more ways that you can or should or must use your time, so that you treat each of those 1,440 minutes more preciously. Whereas younger consumers, like my son's in college, and he always says how busy he is, and I'm like, bro, you wouldn't know busy if it was in the same room with you. Like someday you'll know what busy is, and today's not that day. Eventually you will, and that's okay. You just don't have a
When you
perception.
have a newborn.
Yeah, precisely, and running a company or whatever. Like, yeah, you'll know. And so I think that's part of it. So that was one of the big shocks in the research. The other one, as we touched on earlier, just how effective this like fast pass strategy can be across every industry, that customers are like, yep, some people don't have the financial resources or whatever to participate in an upcharged, speed enabled parallel service, but a lot of people do, and they are pumped about it. Like, yes, please give me an opportunity to pay you more money for the exact same thing, but get it faster. There's a real economic opportunity there.
I guess the insight here is that people value time differently,
Yep.
and whether generationally, maybe it's on an individual basis. So it's almost like time relativity because it's not necessarily that the Gen Z person has more time.
No,
They just
nobody.
have a different experience of what time means to them.
That's right. Yeah, because literally nobody has more time.
Right.
They have more or fewer obligations to their time, but nobody has more time. And that's the part that's so fascinating about it. And again, kind of how this became a thing is that, COVID made us think that through. Like, oh man, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with this minute? What am I doing with this second? And that kind of kicked this whole deal off.
It's like giving time more meaning,
Yep.
and we want to be more meaningful with our time.
Yeah, intentional, right? It's intentionality. You think, well, I'm never going to get that 12 minutes back that I was on hold. I can't get it back. It's gone forever. And people used to be like, well, that's just how business works. And now they're like, you know what? I'm not going to stand for it anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, and then there's the time blend of work life. Like I'm at home, and when does work end, and when does
That's it.
my life start? There's
Yep.
like this haze, if you will, in our personal lives that's affecting our perception of time. I think it's such a really powerful topic that you're talking about because it has so many different ways you could look at it, in terms of like what we value, how we use it, how we deploy it, how we strategically manage it. Um, Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
This
Thanks
is
for
like
asking. It's
we could
fun.
talk for 2 hours.
It's a blast. It's always great talking to you. And I appreciate the good questions and the insights as well, because this is so new. Um, I really am just kicking this off in terms of keynote presentations and things like that, that it's always nice to riff on it because it just makes my work better.
And it could maybe give you some new perspectives. And I think
Yeah,
that's
great.
you just when you get this thing going. Is this going to become a book, by the way?
You know, maybe. I mean, that's usually my process, right? So I do a huge
Hmm.
research project, and then I do, a keynote, and I'll deliver it 30 times, and then if I like it and people seem to like it, then I'll turn it into a book. So that's typically the way I do it. Whether I want to work that hard to write another book, I don't know. We'll see. Depends on how much tequila I got to drink.
Well, here's an offer. And thank you, by the way, for writing a review of my book. I'd love to have you back talking about my book, and maybe you and I can make it like a loose one where we both have tequila while we talk about my book. How's that
That's
sound?
not a problem. It's always literally arm's length away. So that part is not a not an
Maybe
obstacle to participation.
That's like, like what's it called? Comedians in cars having coffee. So we should
Yes,
have like tequila talking
I love
about
it.
time.
I think we can do that and open up to the audience. Everybody, go buy some tequila. I got links on my Instagram account. Tequila J Baer. Go find good tequila.
Okay, what's the link? I'll put it in the show notes. What's the links you want to send people?
Instagram.com/tequila J Baer.
There it is. That is the link that will be there, plus jbear.com and all the other links, right?
Yep. Timetowin.com is the research.
Okay, awesome. Thanks again for being on the show.
Always a pleasure.
Awesome. And thank you, everyone that's listening. Go to groundswell.fm. There's a button called click to talk to Scott. It's a little speak pipe. You can send me a voicemail, what you love, what you don't like, what you're thinking about, what do you think of time, how could I better spend your time on this podcast, whatever you like. And until next time, mahalo.